Now I had to get the money. And this became quite an experience. Well, I'm a returned missionary, and I'm married, and I figured, and I got these contracts, and these contracts, to me, in and of them by themselves, are an asset. So I figured I could take the contracts in and say, here. But the problem was, it was a performance deal, a performance contract. It was really only an asset if I could build the signs. Well, I'd mentioned earlier that I had built, before my mission, 4 billboards. So I had pictures of those 4 signs I could show. Well, here's what I've done. And so that worked in my favor. My gosh, I just went all over the place. I just got turned down. I went to every single bank in Idaho Falls, and they all said no. So I don't think I've told this story, but there was a man named Mr. Doherty. He was the tractor dealer in Idaho Falls, and so a lot of equipment, a lot of tractors, very successful, retired, living in a building that he owned on the 2nd floor, all by himself, a desk there, had a cat, and he had a whole row of files. And there he was, an older man, probably in his 80s or maybe late 70s. And I go to him. I tell him what I want. I was amazed because he had some bird seed. He'd take the bird seed, he'd put it right on his window sill, open up the window a little bit, and he'd watch these birds come and eat this bird seed. And he just loved watching these birds. And even while I was talking to him, he said, "Now, Jimmy, look at this little bird over there. Isn't that wonderful how they eat the seed?" Oh, what an experience he was. He was really a character. I got all through, and he said, "Well," he said, "let me tell you something. You want me to loan you money to build those billboards, don't you?" I said, "Yes." He said, "I could do that. I could do that easy. But that might not be the best thing for you." He says, "So I could fall dead tomorrow. Or I could fall dead in a year. And then after I loan you the money, you're going to sell more billboards, so then you're going to need more money. And eventually I'm going to tell you that I can't keep funding these billboards. Now what are you going to do?" He said, "I want to tell you something. One thing about America, there's lots of banks. And you've been going and you've seen 3 banks in Idaho Falls. Idaho's a big state. There's all kinds of banks here. Montana has banks. Wyoming has banks. Young man, get off your butt and start seeing these banks. And one of these banks will say yes to you." That's my advice. A lot of banks. They'll go to work. Well, so I put my tail in between my legs and I left. But he was right, and I knew he was. Like a mission field. They say no, and you find someone that invites you in and they want to talk. Wonderful. Now in Ireland, that wasn't too often. But anyway, so I ended up in Rexburg, Idaho. And the guy's name was Steve Mickle. He was the son of the founder and the president of the bank. And I showed him my contracts. I showed him what I wanted. I wanted to fund and finance these contracts. He said, "Well, what happens if the sign blows down and you're collecting monthly rent on that sign? Then what are you going to do?" I said, "Well, I'm going to go and get the sign built back up. But I'm going to build them in the first place so they won't fall down." And he said, well, easier said than done. He said, now what happens if by chance they don't pay? So we've loaned you the money, you build a sign, and they don't pay. Now what are you going to do? I said, well, I hadn't really thought about that, and my idea is to sell them to people who will pay. So he said, let's work out a deal here. He said, now, how much do you need? And I said, well, I want to borrow 50% on these contracts. And then I'll be able to build the signs, pay for the location for the life of the sign, which will be 4 years, and I'll have maybe a little extra. But I got to have some loosage there in case maybe one sign might cost a little more and one a little bit less, so it all balances out to about 50%. He says, okay. So when the money comes in, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take, and 50% of that money, plus the interest on that money, each month will be paid. We want you to assign the contract to us. I said, I like that, because that means I tell them to pay you. He said, that's right. I said, that'll be an incentive for them to make sure they get the money to you because you're a bank and you have more clout than me, and consequently, I think it's going to improve the likelihood of my success dramatically. He agreed. Then what we're going to do is we're going to hold back 5% in what we call a maintenance fund. So we'll set money aside, 5%, for maintenance in the event the sign blows down or something happens to the sign. Yes. Now we're going to also put another 5% away, and that 5% is to take care of unforeseen contingencies, such as they don't pay, and we can build up a little fund there while you're battling it out to get them to pay. Right. And then 5% in what is called a compensating bank balance. And this is smart for you and us. We like bank balances. So we want to take 5% and compensate. You're going to compensate us for the loan, but the money is still yours. But nevertheless, it's a compensation to us. And I said, that sounds good. And the rest is yours. So we think with that, you're going to be motivated to keep building signs and selling signs as fast as you can. And we're going to finance every sign that you can sell. Now, I was in business, and Howard Doherty was right. Because like he said to me, if you borrow from the bank and you pay the bank back as agreed, you build credit. And that's the most valuable thing that you can have in a businessman's life is credit, and particularly with a bank. So I was off and running. Now, what had happened that became very, very unique was that before I started to build these signs, so keep in mind that I had sold the signs and I had to run and get the money to build the signs. In the meantime, there was a friend. He was a year older than me in the same ward. His name was Kieth J. Beezer. His father built our house, the home that we were living in at that time. So he went from a little tiny 3-room apartment house, not apartment, but little tiny cabin with no foundation and no running water until I was a sophomore in high school. So we just used an outhouse, and we never had any running water whatsoever. It was really rough on my mother with one coal stove to heat that place. So that meant our bedroom was an iceberg in the wintertime. And but he had finished BYU, had a degree in business, but he grew up with a hammer in his hand. His father had used him for all these years as a kid growing up to help build homes, etc. And Roland J. Beezer was the father's name. So Kieth was driving home from BYU, going down Memorial Drive. I happened to be coming up Memorial Drive. I saw him. I did a turnaround, honked him down, got him out of his car, had wife, 2 kids in the back seat of that car. I said, Kieth, I want to give you a dream. I want you to build billboards. I can sell these billboards, Kieth. I can design these billboards better than anybody else. There's no one in the state can even come close to me in designing. I can beat them all. And I know that you can build anything that I can design, and we're going to have fun. We're going to change the whole outlook of outdoor advertising, you and I. You build them, I design them, create them, and I can finance them. I got the ability to finance them. We're in business, Kieth. Now, while I was in California, while I was there, waiting for Carol, I wasn't around sucking my thumb while she was going through the 3 months of schooling. And I'd heard about a trade school. And I went to the trade school, and they had a little sign company, a little sign department for teaching you how to make signs of all kinds. I enrolled. First day of school. I go there like I was dressed on my mission. No one was dressed like that. No one had a tie on. No one had a white shirt on. No one had a sports coat on. No one had slacks. They were really rugged. And about 3/4 were all brown or black. Me, I was white. And I was dressed to kill, according to them. And I decided I'm going to wear my outfit every day. I will not lower myself to them. I'm going to remain me. Well, started. At about the time I got ready to go home, the teacher came. As I've been teaching this class for 30 years, I've not ever had a student like you. Here is a certificate. You have finished a 2-year course in 3 months. And I wish you the best. I can't teach you anymore. You already know. There's one kid there. And that kid was named Panama. He's born and raised in Panama. But I could tell out of all these other kids, and of course he was black. I went to him and I said, Panama, I'd like to work a deal with you. Would you like to come to Idaho Falls and spend the summer before you start school again in the fall and paint signs for me? And I says, I really believe in you. He said, well, I've never been out of California. I came directly from Panama to California. I haven't seen anything besides California. He said, I'm going to do it. And he had a lot of personality, and the kids kind of teased him a little bit because he was from Panama and not from Los Angeles. So he came to Idaho Falls. Well, the first thing is we got to find an apartment for him. So we go to work, and we work, and we hunt. We look up the ads in the newspaper, and everyone says no. As soon as they see Panama, it's no. They wouldn't consider. He was the wrong color. So in desperation, my mother says, Doug, why don't we have him sleep downstairs in the basement where you slept all those years, and he can sleep in your bed. And so Panama did. Now, my parents were really enamored by him because he really had an engaging personality. But then it came time for a haircut. Well, I had just called up my barber and says, I got a friend and he's working for me and want to know if I can bring him in for a haircut. Sure, bring him in. So I took him in, but they turned me down. They wouldn't cut his hair. That made me mad. I went all over. They all turned him down. Well, after scouting around after a couple days, we found a barber who was inebriated half the time on the outskirts of Idaho Falls on the old Arco Highway, and the truckers would go there because they could get a haircut half price. So I took Panama, and the guy couldn't tell the difference between black and white. I liked him, and I liked him a lot. He cut his hair. My parents were quite proud of taking him when they go out to eat, which was often in those days. They took Panama along at night. They liked Panama. But you're around him, who couldn't help but like Panama? Well, I just jump ahead after 3 years of this. He came to me and he said, Doug, I'm the only black person in Idaho Falls, but I'm really not black anyway. I'm not black. I'm copper colored. You know that. I'm not black. I'm copper colored. And he was a very kind of a real good looking kid, by the way. He says, I got to find me a wife. There's no one here. And so we parted after 3 years. He went back to Los Angeles. Or I should say he remained there and didn't come the next season. But during that time, he was there. It had to be. So there's my team. I got a guy that can build the signs. I got a guy that can paint the signs. I have lined up the money. And I started to build signs. And I lined up the locations. I went to one farmer who owned more frontage than anybody I knew. I said, I want to work a deal. As if I build these signs, I will give you 1 month's income goes to you. He said, it's a deal. He said, I've looked and seen a few of your signs, and you're going to outsell everybody. These signs are fantastic that you're doing. I was really impressed because he was just a typical farmer, but he noticed the difference. So we started to fill up the highways coming into Idaho Falls with SNAR signs, and they were different. There were no two alike, and they so far outclassed the others because the others were traditional rectangles, no personality, and mine went all over the place. They're abstract, and they were humorous, a lot of fun, and Kieth Beezer could build those signs. No matter how extravagant they were, he could build those signs.